Good evening, everyone. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I want to welcome everybody to the special board meeting, November 30th, 6 o'clock. And let's have the approval of the agenda, please. Entertain a motion.
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Motion by Andy.
I'll second.
Second by Jeannie. Is there any discussion on the agenda?
Not that I noticed till just a second ago. Both of the PDFs say English. I assume one of those should be.
Yeah, two, one. Let's delete the second one. Okay, any other? All in favor of approving the agenda with the deletion of the second November 24th PDF, please signify by saying aye.
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 Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you, I will. Is that better? Thank you. Okay, discussion items. Levy rate and duration and discussion about the passage and resolution as a voted measure. Excuse me. Consent agenda. We need to approve the consent agenda as presented. I'd entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent agendas.
Motion by Lisa. Is there a second?
I will second it.
Seconded by Andy?
Yep.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, yes. Aye. Oh, yes. Thank you. Okay. On to number 3 is discussion items. And we have only one item under discussion, and that's the levy rates and duration and discussion about the passage and the resolution as a voted measure. I'm going to turn this over to Craig.
Thank you very much. I did present or have a little handout here for you. I just want to, and I'll follow that as best as I can. So I just want to maybe give a little introduction. 4 years ago, they changed the name of, it used to be a maintenance and operation levy, but it's now an educational programs and operation. So we use the acronym EPO for that. And in our packet is we'll see a little bit of history, but I just want to give an overview of the M&O, the EPO now. And in 2018, the district passed a 4-year levy. And it ends the calendar year of 2022, so next year. However, in order to replace that levy in 2023, we typically need to vote, have a ballot measure in front of the voters during 2022. And we also, so tonight, the purpose of tonight really is to discuss the levy. I have some handouts in there with the help of our financial bond advisor, D.A. Davidson. I've been working with them to come up with some slides and so show some history. And then the levy mainly is a mathematical calculation dependent upon the assessed valuation in the district and a levy rate, an estimated levy rate. And that levy rate per $1,000 of valuation equals a total amount to be collected. So we estimate the levy rate, but because we don't know specifically what the valuation is going to be, we estimate the rate, but have the voters really vote on the total amount to be collected. Because if the valuation is higher than estimated, then the rate goes down. If the valuation is lower, then the rate goes up. So there's some certain estimates that we'll need to come up with. And so at the end of tonight, I'd really like to have 3 questions answered. Number 1, the duration, whether 2, 3, or 4 years, the levy rate per 1,000, and then the amount to be collected. And as I go through all these handouts, hopefully we'll be able to have a little more understanding of what we need to do. But there have been a couple of changes since the last time that a levy was put on the ballot. The first one that's kind of interesting is that all districts are now required to have a local voters pamphlet and with an explanation statement of the purpose of the ballot measure. And our bond counsel, Jim McNeil, has prepared that. That's one of our handouts. So we need to just look at that and see if we're comfortable with that. The other thing that's interesting is that as far as that pamphlet, the district needs to appoint, if there are people that apply, for members to be for the levy and against the levy as far as a committee member. So that's actually another handout in here of the newspaper advertisement requesting if people want to be for or against, they need to notify me, and then the board at the meeting in December 8th would appoint them to be members of that committee.
One question, if you have more call that want to help versus, or no, it's not the right word.
For or against?
More for than are against. Can the committee be lopsided, or you just take what you get? Or?
Yeah, we just take what we get because the against would be in charge of writing the against on the ballot. And
so it's not like you have to have equal numbers down each side of the table to fight and
No,
the winner take
no.
all.
And maybe nobody will want to be on the committee at all, but that's part of the law. The other thing is that since the last levy, OSPI now wants to approve the spending plan of the levy. So they're requiring me to, again, based upon how much we're going to collect, how we're going to spend those dollars. So that's another important part that needs to be sent off. And my goal is to have that number tonight, and then I can do the spending plan and get it off to OSPI for their approval. So that's kind of the big picture of the items tonight. There's also a levy resolution that would be included in the board packet for the 8th, and for the board to approve the length and the amount. So there's sample resolution is also included in the handout. So having said that, let's maybe go to the next. The first handout, again, was prepared by D.A. Davidson. It shows some election trends and tax rate history. That's pretty interesting. You know, I really don't want to have to go over every page unless you want to, but page number 1 just is the history since the year 2000 in the entire state of that. Yep. So election trends and tax history. The next page, page 1, shows the number of ballot issues and the percent of success since the year 2000. And this is for, you know, the now EPOs. You know, back in the day it was M&O, but you see, you know, as far as the state, it's a pretty high passage rate. The next slide or page 2, is for capital projects levies, and those are specifically meant for equipment, typically equipment or building. Capital project levies can be up to 6 years. The one reason that some districts are going for a capital levy is that it only requires a simple majority, 50% plus 1.
Can you give us an example of that for- Oh, excuse me.
So a bond would be certainly for a lot higher dollar amount, you know, 50, 40 million. I mean, it's gotta be, you know, the rates, if it's too high of amount, the rates would be very high. So these are typically,
So this would be like an HVA system?
This
for
would
a
be-
whole building?
yep, or technology, hardware.
Okay,
It's not for personnel.
it's not
Right.
personnel, this is
It's not
capital. This is
personnel.
like-
This is capital. This is construction, you know, a new roof, something like that. Even can be buses. You know,
Would
you
this
could-
be like stadium?
Maybe not buses, probably not buses.
Could
but
this be like stadiums?
This could be.
Okay.
A bond is basically like putting it on a credit card and letting the taxpayers pay that down over time. Whereas a capital levy is kind of pay as you go. So if you can raise enough money to address that, you can go out for a capital levy. But a bond typically is larger scale. And the amount of money is paid off over time. Typically bonds are for buildings, levies are for learning. So.
Yeah.
capture that.
So processors never use a capital project levy.
There's the small scale stuff. It's like a roof. And so like Housel Middle School, this renovation was done about 20 years, over 20 years ago. So there are even pieces of this building that need to be probably addressed, and a capital levy could actually help with that versus going out and running a bond within the cycle of the bond.
Now, you certainly could include in your EPO levy, you know, dollars for construction, right?
But this is different than.
But that's different.
APO. Okay.
Correct. And some districts have 2 measures, and the taxpayers could approve one and not the other, or they could approve both or not approve both. So like I say, we've never run a capital levy, but those are the success rates shown on page 2. Page 3 is bonds. You'll see bonds require 60% plus 1, not 50% plus 1. So you can see the bond passage rate is very challenging. In order to pass a bond, there'll be a slide here that shows our history of bonds since 2005, and some of you know the percentage of votes, but you'll find out here in a minute. The other thing that's interesting is when is the best time to put a proposition? You'll see in February, you know, the 92%, 92.5%, April 89.7, and then it goes substantially lower in August, and then back up to 81 in November. Processors typically put their ballots in February. Again, that's another conversation. You do have 2 bites at the apple during the calendar year. So you'll see the history in Prosser. There was a levy that failed in February, then it was rerun in April, and it passed. Then page 5 is just the dates. So if we do run an election in February 8th, then we do, as I talked about earlier, some other meetings have to have their resolution filed with both counties. We actually have property in 2 counties, Clipperton and Benton, by December 10th. That's why the December 8th meeting was really a perfect time to review this. Unless you need more time, then we certainly could look at a passage in April, but the best time historically has been in February. So there, page 6 is the history since 2000. You can see we've had 2-year levies. That's the darker of the slides there. As I say, 2005, we had a bond, 29% in passage, which was pretty brutal. The bond in 2011, 56%. Ran it again 2 months later, got 54.93%. And then our lucky day in February of 17, passage of 73%. As I said, the one time since I've been here, the levy failed in February of 2006. You can read that as 59.6%. So it was, 100 votes short. And then we reran it in April and garnered 65%. So you can see the various times there. 2014, we also ran a 4-year levy, but all the other years up to there, it's been a 2-year levy. Again, we'll have some pros and cons about 2, 3, or 4 that we'll have some discussion. Here's our assessed valuation. Slide 7. You can see a pretty substantial, but conservative growth through the years since 2006. Estimated for 2022 is 1.7 billion of assessed valuation. And I've been working with the county assessors. There's some dollars that aren't in there yet. We won't really know the actual valuation until probably the end of January, but it's the best information that we have right now. Then the history of collection, the dollars that have been approved since 2010. You'll see that the high water mark was 2018. And we can compare the rates here on page 10 if you want to, but 2018, the levy rate was $3.04 per thousand. And then the state reduced the rate that districts could collect from $3.04 to $1.50. And so you'll see a rather substantial, obviously, decline, almost half of what was collected in 2018. And then there's been some slight growth for the last 4 years. 2022 would be 3,668,000 would be the amount to be collected. Again, that's already been approved, so that's been voted on. You can compare some of the other districts in our county. Just a snapshot of a few, page 9. We're not the highest, we're not the lowest. Richland is the highest. We're pretty darn close to Grandview and certainly City. You can read the other ones there. Here's page 10 is really important. This is our rate combining with the bond. So the bond is the lighter color. So 2011 was the last year of the Housel bond that was paid off. And then you'll see the bond was, of course, approved in February of 17, starting collecting in 2018. So 2018 was a pretty high year. as far as the bond and levy. But then you'll see the levy has dropped $1.50, $1.73, estimated $2.13 for 2022, with a bond of $2.55. And that's really some of the history of Prosser and other the state history. Any questions on that? Going too fast, going too slow? The next page is really where we need to, I have a couple different scenarios for you based upon estimated growth. Now, what's interesting is that, so if we're comparing 2022 to 2021, so in the top left hand, you see assessed valuation, growth rate. So in 2021, the rate of growth was 3.29% from 2020, and then estimated 3.64% for calendar year 2022. And it's interesting that Clickitat for 2021 had a 2.8% drop in valuation, and then it's like 18% increase in 2022. But just to put things in perspective, Patterson's valuation is like 1.7 million. So, the rest is Benton County. So, $1.5 million, whatever the number is in Benton County, or $1.5 billion, I should say. So with the 3.64% and the taxes to be collected, the $3,668,000, that would generate a rate of $2.13. So again, we can run as many scenarios as we want. I want to just look down at on the below the third slide down, average compounding growth factors. I think that's pretty relevant. For 5 years, the last 5 years, the district has increased 4.61% in growth, and for the previous 10 years, 4.86. So scenario number one is assuming a pretty conservative 3% rate for the next 4 years. Now, the resolution shows blanks for 4 years, but again, decide how many years we want to run the levy for. But so at the 3% rate, you would see that we would collect using that same $2.13, 3.7 million year one, almost 3.9, 4 million. So roughly 120,000 or something increase each year based on the valuation of 3% at $2.13, which is the current estimated 2022 rate. That makes sense to everybody? Scenario two is if we use the 4% rate. And you can see, the total collections for those 4 years under scenario one, 15.8 million versus 16.2 with the 4% rate. Scenario three is with a $2.25 rate at a 3% growth. Scenario four is 225 at a 4% growth. And then 5 is $2.50, which currently is the maximum rate per 1,000. There's also another a mathematical calculation that the state could also pay per pupil, but the per pupil calculation is way more than what we did. It's too high, and we're just going to vote on it, right? So the 250 is the max, and then you see the 250 on scenario 6 for the 4% growth. I'm not sure if you want me maybe to just finish my conversation and then we can discuss these things, or if you want to tackle this amount and
I had a quick
rate
question,
right now.
mostly because I don't know, maybe everybody else does. Do schools traditionally go for the higher rate? The first go around or?
There's no real answer to that,
Oh, okay.
I don't think.
Okay.
You know, when it was $3 and something. So there's a levy lid, there's a maximum that you can collect.
Mhm.
And I don't really have the figures in front of me, or, you know, but roughly back in that day, it was like $5 per thousand. And with the bond and everything, we never, you know, the challenge is passing a levy that we think we can pass, that the
Mhm.
voters will vote on,
Right.
as opposed to going too high and you shoot yourself in the foot and you don't
Yeah,
pass any
that,
levy.
that was kind of my thought. Do you start at a lower rate in hopes of getting it passed the first time? I
Well-
don't know, just because no experience.
I guess typically if you go for a higher rate and it doesn't pass, then you might lower. it. I mean, I
Right.
don't know.
Mhm.
It's,
Yeah.
that's the conversation.
You go for the lower rate, the question becomes sustainability.
Okay.
Do you have enough money to sustain programs? You go for the higher rate, sometimes people say, well, the district's greedy.
Right.
You know, I'm already paying taxes for a bond and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
And so there's a sweet spot, just like we had talked about at the last thing. The most important thing is that you're able to pass it,
Correct.
right? And so what's that number that we're confident that, yes, it can sustain programs in the manner that we want, but also our patrons will vote yes on it. So that's kind of, and it's gone from when the state came in after McCleary and said $1.50, and then we're gonna take everything else and redistribute it. That was a great selling point that a lot of districts, you know, kind of capitalized on, and like, oh, it's gonna be cut to $1.50. Well, now it's kind of floated back up.
Yeah,
So
I think
those
the next
promises-
year the state raised it to 250 because
Yeah.
everybody was,
Yeah, so those promises
Scramble.
kind of fallen away, but still we have the burden of our bonding as well as levy, levy now piggybacked on that, so.
Okay, I think
trying to
that
find the right
answers.
rate.
so I probably should say, maybe the question is, what the heck does the levy pay for? Right?
Yeah,
And what are you doing with all this, $3 million? And it's meant to be for dollars that the state is not fully funding. A good example is athletics and extracurricular. The state doesn't pay a dime for any athletics, activities, clubs, those kind of things. No funding at all from the state. The state has a formula based on what they call a prototypical school. Like an elementary school is 400. And then if you have 400, then it generates X number of teachers, principals, counselors, librarians, custodians, all these various ratios. And some of these ratios are woefully low. For example,
I remember.
so for example, not to pick on our security people, but it just is a matter of fact that I think the state doesn't even pay for one FTE of security guards. They pay for like 1.2 nurses. So we have over extended beyond those ratios. I mean, there's got to be, you can't cut all these people down to meet those ratios. You wouldn't have enough, sustainability to do things.
Yeah, it was the prototypical school was a good model for saying if we had a school of X number of sizes of students and things like that. It was a great model to say, here's how many staff that you should have. But that didn't really fit in with the context about where that school is at. And so every school within the state of Washington has very unique needs. So being in the Yakima Valley here in Rossa, we have different needs than maybe what, Pasco High would have. So that's where that money comes in, that we can raise local effort assistance, say, well, in Prosser, this is a need and this is a priority. Just like we have with, some of our social emotional learning and or emotional health. We just hired a social worker this last year to be a part of our school, their school nurses, things like that. And then, of course, security was an area that a few years back that the board said, there's a priority there, and we want to guarantee our families that our people will be safe. And so we've used that to provide, some of those monies to provide for that, as well as our athletics and that tradition that everybody has come to know and expect in house schools.
So you'll hear me talk a lot about basic education. That's the dollar amounts that the state funds, right? That's their paramount duty to fund basic education. But then we have Vienna that has all sorts of monies that are not basic education, that are program dollars, compensatory services. Certainly, there's special ed, there's transportation, there's other buckets of money that have different funding formulas, but the biggest one by far is the basic education piece. So for example, if the prototypical elementary school is 400 and you have 800 kids, then you just multiply those ratios times 2. So it moves, but the ratios are set. Smaller class sizes than what the state funds us for. Those kind of things are what we spend the levy dollars on. So that they have those ratios, and then there's also percentages, dollar amounts for non-employee costs. It's called MSOC, is the acronym, materials, supplies, and operating costs, utilities, and all that other, supplies, books, items, that insurance, liability insurance that needs to be paid out of those MSOC dollars. So if we're short on that, then that's what the levy is used for. The other thing that I might mention too is that in addition to the local levy, the state also has a state matching formula. But in order to get any money from the state, the district has to pass the levy. So if we don't pass a levy, we won't get any. It's called Levy Equalization. It's meant to try and equalize the higher or the lower property tax districts with the higher ones, like Bellevue or whatever, Seattle. They probably don't have a levy equalization piece because their values are so high. But ours, we do, even though 1.7 billion seems pretty high to me and maybe to you, but comparatively, we do qualify for levy equalization. So we can maybe hold on this, and then maybe I'll just finish, then we can go back on that if you don't mind. The next one is the resolution, prepared again by Mr. McNeil, our bond counsel. And there's blanks, whether it's 2, 3, or 4 years, and the amount to be collected. And it talks about what the ballot would actually look like on page 3. And this is the proposition number 1. And the rates, and then the levy amount. So this would be presented to the board on December 8th for your vote. Of course, we'd recommend that it gets passed, but it's up to the board. And then I just wanted to point out, it does talk in here about what the levy would be used for. If I can find that. Yeah, maybe the easiest one is just is this explanatory statement, which is the next page just by itself. Again, this will go in the levy, the voters pamphlet. You can see the highlighted amounts. We can discuss this if you want to. I mean, I feel it's pretty well worded. I guess the state only allows 250 words. And we have 226 on here, so we gotta be careful of expanding this too much, but it talks about these expenses include but are not limited to technology, athletics, smaller class sizes, school safety, instructional materials, special ed, maintenance, student activities, teaching and support staff, and other educational programs and operation expenses. And I think that's pretty well worded. That's what I think I would report to OSPI, say, here's what we're spending our dollars on. Not sure if you have any other, if there's something in there you don't like, or you think we need to add. You got, what, 24 words left? Go to 250. To me, that pretty much covers what we're spending the dollars on.
Staff. Oh,
Teaching and support staff. Yeah. I mean, it's not a,
okay, I thought you said earlier. Yeah.
that's for the capital levy.
Oh, okay.
We did a capital levy.
I have never been accused of not being able to hear me. So thank you. That's a compliment. All right, that better? Okay.
So there's that.
Okay.
Maybe the last piece is just, the last page is what has been in the newspaper. Seeking applications for the pro, for or against statements. So as of today, I've not received any.
And this has already been posted.
This is in the newspaper on last Wednesday, and will also be on December 1. And I have by this Friday to let me know. That'll give us the board some time. I think there's a form that we need to fill out if we appoint people. It's a generic form. That's, again, following the letter of the law to post that. This basically was written by my bond counsel. So that's really all that I have to discuss. We start off the discussion. Again, maybe we can talk about the length first, if that's the pleasure.
What is the cost to run the bond?
That's a great question, because typically we share the costs with all the other districts, like in Benton County.
Mhm.
Our portion's probably about 20,000 roughly. I mean, I should probably look that up. But there certainly is a cost to run that.
And that's just a file with the county and habit. That wouldn't be monies to promote the bond. That has to be separately and privately funded.
Correct. Yes. So that's a good point. The district can provide facts, but we cannot say, please vote yes for this. The district has normally done a flyer that we can pay for and say, here's what the levy is going to pay for. Here's the rates. Here's the amount. Here's the date of the election. And then I know, at least for the bond in 2017, Mr. Hunt was very influential in coming up with for the bond committee, raising funds, knocking on doors and flyers and please vote yes and those kind of things. But the district can't use vehicles. They can't promote the bond. We can't go out and put signs on, vote yes with the district vehicles or anything like that. You can have something in your own. You can obviously put a sign in your own, but not district vehicles or monies to promote the bond. Just the facts.
Yeah, we can't copy machine. You couldn't use postage or anything,
Right.
or employee.
Correct. Yep. Like I say, there's pros and cons to 4 years versus 2. We don't know what the world's going to be like, 2 years from now. We don't know what OSPI is going to do with the levy rate in 2 years from now. So,
But up until 2017, all of our other M&O, or now it's EPOs, were all 2 year.
correct.
And that was our only dip in the 4-year pool was in 2017. So all of our other M&Os were all 2-year. And they were just fine, so. I don't know that there was any, I don't know what the rationale was going for 4 years.
Well, 4 years is.
Yeah.
You know, well, here we are again. It seemed like we just
Yeah.
passed this thing. Or
I
voted
think
on
that's what
this,
it was, yeah.
You know, kind of an election costs and.
And we knew we had a big bond coming up. and so
Right,
it was like,
and,
let's just
you know,
get it done. and-
There are,
Yeah,
I mean, from planning, budgeting perspective, if you know what it is in 4 years, that makes it, you know, a lot better to budget those
and
things. but-
McClary was still a huge question mark.
Yep.
And those days, so.
So again, 2, 3, or 4, I mean, obviously you wouldn't want to do one, but.
No.
um,
Andy, you've been around for both the 2s and the 4s. What was your preference?
Honestly, the 4 worked out well.
Yeah.
But I think Craig's correct in the fact that things are so, a lot of upheaval.
Yeah.
Maybe shoot for a 3, and I certainly wouldn't max it out, because I think when we ran the levy or the bond for the building, we went with like a 12-year or something because it brought the interest rate down, and I don't remember how long. Do you remember offhand?
Well, the bond is at least 20 years.
Was it 20?
Yeah, it might even be 30.
No, it was
We got it
drastically
that down.
less.
Yeah.
We cut a bunch off because
Hauser was a 20-year bond, I think.
it raised the payments a little bit, but I think we got a better interest, and but yeah, so there's still a, 15 years.
Yeah,
So
so
I don't know. 3 sounds good. I think you're right though. 2 seemed like as soon as you got done with it,
You were
it's
doing it
like,
again.
yeah. So
because it is a pretty fairly intense campaign
yeah.
for those that, want to.
And the other part of it too is I remember them saying that spring elections were almost always better in approval ratings. But it also depends on how many others are running, or if any, because if we're by ourselves, the cost skyrockets.
All right.
So that was a deciding factor too. If nobody else happens to be running one for some reason and we have to run a special, it like triples the price.
And I could find it out. I'll look. See what it was a couple of years ago.
Jeannie, what's your thought on it?
I kind of think shorter, obviously, I'm one of the older people here and we have a lot of friends that we've heard a lot of stuff about. Man, this bond, we're paying a lot more, so might be harder to go out and ask for longer, the 4 years. And am I making myself clear?
Mhm.
They already think they're paying a ton. I had one person tell me, oh, I don't want to see that high school. We've had to pay more than we ever thought we'd have to. And we just tell them, yeah, but we sure needed it, didn't we? So maybe 4 years might be pushing it. What do you guys think? Got an opinion?
Not really. I would probably lead on probably a 3 if we don't want to go 4, just to not do it again. In a couple years, or a year and a half, roughly, whatever it ends up being. Yeah, I'd probably lean towards a 3.
My concern isn't, I think 3 years would be good. I think 2 is just you're out and back. A February 8th bond, the ballots go out January 21st. Nobody's going to do anything over the holidays. So that's 20 days to educate the community and talk to, people are very concerned about taxes. Since the school capital bond, we've had the fire station bond. Everybody is taxed. The county raised the assessment rates higher. And when you get that, your Valentine, your county card, that's a big chunk of money. And I think we have to do a bigger PR and marketing campaign than we can do in 20 days. And thinking about it, I know the education says that a spring bond passes at a higher rate. In August, we're going to have 2 remodeled elementary buildings to show off. It'll be back to school. And hopefully, maybe we'll have better news concerning the pandemic, or maybe, hard feelings about it will perhaps die out. And I think that might be an opportunity to run with, and a fit to do a better job and have 8 months. The ballots would go out July 15th for an August bond, and that would give us 7 months to aggressively work in the community, be at every public event, and, just work hard to make sure it passes, because if it doesn't pass, it's going to hurt the school. And then if it failed again, if it did fail in August, we'd have, one more time in November. But I think that February date is just such a rush at this point.
April, same thing. I mean, you could run it in April. but-
Right.
There again, though, if nobody else is running anything in April.
Right.
So it might be worth looking into for April, but I think you're right, though, because you have 1 month
Yeah.
basically to just hit it.
Yeah, Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we wait until August, we already have staff in place, and if it doesn't pass, we're paying for them for the full year and getting no money in January.
The money will end in December, is that right?
Uh-huh. That's the thing, like, I agree that's a very short time for advertisement, but we would have so little time. Like, we would already have people working, and then if we lose, we have to cover that basically in January on. So I would, that just food for thought.
Yeah, so in essence, the levy's a calendar year, of course, but with the school year, roughly it's half. So this 3.6 million, if it wasn't approved in 2023, we still get roughly half of that for 2023, but that would be it. Because you'd have to run another levy in 2023 that you wouldn't get until calendar year 24. So you'd roughly lose half of that plus whatever half of the state levy, which is another million and a half total. So another 750,000. So you'd probably lose a couple $1 million worth of.
And the things that would be facing the cuts, if there was to be cuts, would be the athletic, the small class college, everything that's covered right now
Right.
under that's being paid for out of
But Deanna's point is a good one. Typically, May 15th, depending on when the legislature passes the biennial budget, is the drop dead date for reduction in force notices. That's the point. If they're hired, you can't release any teachers now. Classified staff doesn't have the same rules, but
So if we shot for April, we would know before the drop dead date.
right.
And theoretically, we could still roll around, although its success rates are less, to possibly shoot for November if we fail in April.
Or August. I think August is also another.
Yeah.
But by
option.
then,
But
but then it would be almost too late because we,
Either one.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have another shot at the apple, but
Right. but nothing's guaranteed.
nothing's guaranteed.
Right. So that's why we're almost to February, and if it doesn't pass, the April. Otherwise, we're kind of locked in
But
with
then
staff.
if you spend the money to run for a February, we only have, half a month or a month of.
Right.
of-
I mean, that's a good point.
Advertising is not the
I
right
mean,
word, but. you
Yeah.
know,
I mean,
Getting the message out.
Melissa's point's a good one because
It is.
I want to hear from Hannah too. Hannah, what are your thoughts on it?
I don't know that I have enough experience in the world of taxes or
good for
Oh,
you.
you will.
to make an informed statement.
Okay, that's good. I shouldn't want to forget you there, so.
That's always a smart thing.
Well, there's a ton of things, when he talks about what they pay for. you have, for instance, our nurses way back in the good old days, you just had to cover your right eye and read an eye chart and it said, hey, it's great. Now there's like 4 other things they have to do, all are unfunded mandates. So you spend extra to do all these things and it's got to come from somewhere. So
Well, I like the point of, not having enough time to get ready for February, but I think we should shoot for April, and then if we don't get it, come back and hit it in August. But then again, what Craig said about if other school districts are running, can you find out who's running when? Maybe others will be looking at the same thing we
Yeah,
are,
should be able
thinking,
to-
thinking that, wow, this is gonna be quick, and, people are out of work, been living on, some have been living on unemployment, and hate for their taxes to be raised again, and it might not, like Lisa said, leave enough
I
time
can
to
ask our
educate.
districts in
Yeah.
our area who's running.
I guess I want to just kind of throw this out there because it makes me nervous about that. We're locked in to May 15th. We have to let staff know if they're coming back or not. If we went with the February and that didn't pass, we could go out in April. What if we went with a 3-year levy, but we went with the 3%, the $2.13, go with a lower amount. I think that was for scenario 1.
Scenario one,
The
yes. it was.
Scenario 1, where we're asking for, we're not gouging our taxpayers, we're asking for the lowest amount that is available. And I think that 3% is assessed valuation increase. I think that's probably a pretty low
It is.
number of assessed value because we've got so much growth
Right.
that's occurring right now in our area. There's all these homes that are being built. And so I think that's I think it's probably going to cost them actually less than 213. But anyway, I think it's a real reasonable rate. But I'm real nervous at having our second chance happen after the May 15th date. And I'm nervous because it does impact staff and their futures too. They need a promise that they're going to have a job next year. And I need to know that I can pay them for the next year by May 15th.
But I can, in the current job climate and education, none of those people will still be here in August. They'll all have jobs. They'll be gone.
But they'll be gone.
They'll be
Yeah. And I care about the staff that we have. So
I agree with Lisa. You're like, oh my gosh, how can we turn this around in 20 days?
right.
But it is really, it's kind of, we get a little hamstrung because of the way things like timelines line up for districts. But
I think we need to think about too, if we go out in 20 days and it fails, we're not just going back to try again in April. We're in a hole and we got to dig out of it and try again. And we'll have spent our money. And I think like Jeannie, I will tell you, nobody is in favor of paying more taxes ever. And everybody is so maxed out on taxes. I didn't talk to one person, and I talked to people from various walks of life about this that said, oh yeah, I want to pay more taxes. I want to pass it. They say, I'm paying a ton of money for this capital bond. I don't understand, there's a lack of education there. I certainly understand that you've got to be able to pay your employees. You got to plan. And I empathize with that. But I'm very concerned about what would happen if we go out and fail hard, or, you fail hard or fail by a little bit. It doesn't matter. And then have to go back. We can only go twice in 1 year. So fail in February and go back in April. I mean, that's worst case scenario. And that's rough, but I think you have to balance out the worst case scenario with what the possibilities are in this climate. We've never tried to pass something in a COVID climate. The economy is very strange. Nothing is normal, and that has to be considered.
So Deanna, what you're saying, if we can't guarantee the contracts, the teachers, there's such a demand that they will immediately go somewhere else.
there's a huge demand in a small pool for literally even elementary positions used to be very large schools. They just don't exist anymore. And what I'm saying is we have people, if we're in a position, like say, whenever we go, if we're in a position where we're reducing in staff and then hoping something's going to pass later, we won't be able to hand back, say, oh, you have a job until after that passes.
Mhm.
And the people won't be there anymore. They'll have gotten jobs. They'll have to. People have to have jobs. So
Well, yeah, certainly. Well, I know that.
And you can't really bank on, retirements and, I mean, who knows, right? There's gonna be some attrition, but
Not enough. to
not $1
cover-
million worth.
Not enough to cover $3 million.
Oh, the one thing I've heard, and I think we need to think about it differently. It's not come up with a number that will pass, it's come up with a number that's necessary. Because the whole reason for sweating bullets on not passing it is you're not supposed to shoot for the moon. It's the old saying, why wish for a loaf of bread when you can wish for the whole store? Well, we need to find out how much the loaf of bread is and just mind our manners. But that and being on a 213, it needs to be a 5 or a 0 on the end. That should be a state law.
215.
There you go. That's what I want to hear.
Yeah.
I do have a couple questions in regard to if we're looking at dollar amount, I think we've kind of got a consensus, at least I think, on the time frame. Now it's just when and how much and go for there. So looking at the budget, I see, according to what I've understanding of this is we passed a budget that is basically 1.6 million underfunded. So we're dipping into reserves at that point. So our next year's beginning fund balance is going to be about 2.5 million.
If the
And change.
scenario happens. Now, we've ended up. That budget with the beginning fund balance is way lower than what we actually ended up at.
So the 4.2 is
So.
Not right.
I think I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I know it's more than 4.2 to start with.
So I guess the part of the question I have is, trying to sell an additional or an added tax or an additional levy. What are we getting? What is the return on investment for the constituents, people in this community? That's what we've really got to sell at this point. And I guess my question is, why is the budget $1.6 million short to begin with? And what's the overall cause of that? And as it keeps going, the number that we need to levy is going to increase to cover whatever these costs are that keep going up that's not being funded by the state.
There's always a balance, of course, between how much, fund balance money in the bank that we need, want, right, versus, what we spend. 80% of our budget is staff. So obviously we're overstaffed. We pay more. So the state allocates basically $3 amounts. They allocate a dollar amount per teacher. And it's roughly 67,000 is the average that they pay across. They also have an allocation for administrative personnel. Then they have the last allocation is for the classified. So depending on those ratios, we're overstaffed in some of those areas. And so the levy needs to make up for some of that, but certainly not enough. So when it went from the 4 million, that we were collecting down to the, 2 and roughly the 3, we haven't, as far as I know, really made any cuts in any programs or anything like that. This last year, I can say that the budget was like $1.3 million deficit, and we actually gained over $1 million of. So COVID, I won't say this publicly, but COVID in some ways has helped the district's finances. Lack of substitute costs, with buildings being closed for a certain amount of time, utilities and those kind of things. And then the federal government has kicked in, some of this ESSER dollars that we've, been able to utilize. So we're in a good financial situation, at least to start the year. Now, that budget, it is a budget. It's not, it's our best estimate of what we think is going to happen based on our enrollment. The enrollment generates the dollars, and we're actually, enrollment is pretty good right now as compared to the budget, but it's like 75 or something less than I budgeted enrollment in the 2021 year. So all those things, lower enrollment, not a staff reductions, contribute to that number. We're going to be bargaining with the coaches, which certainly the state doesn't pay anything for as far as extracurricular. So that's in there. So again, most of it's going to be staffing is the overage. So we agree on 3 years?
I think we've agreed on
I'm
3
I'm on
years.
3 years.
and 4 years.
And you said 213 at a 10% valuation, right?
52.
I'm
I
joking.
said what?
I'm joking. 3% increase. 3% increase.
That's 3%. I think that's what we were all kind of talking about. But is that kind of where everybody was at the lowest? At the, are we all looking at that 213 as being the rate that we'd like to stick with the 3% growth, estimated growth?
People would go for that quicker than.
Jason, would you be comfortable with that?
I also think the 3% growth is pretty conservative.
It is.
That's very
In
conservative.
fact, probably very.
I think it's appropriate at this point that would be someone I would probably lean towards. I really do think it needs to be defined a little bit more than what we have in here and what the money's actually being spent on. And
On the-
what this excess levy amount is. And that's how you sell the program. These are all pretty general.
Right.
And I get it because of lack of words, but it's up to us to do our due diligence to make sure it's specific.
Do you have a copy of that fact sheet that we used before? Matt?
Not with me, no.
I didn't bring my,
They read it in the general sense because you can't spend anything outside of that. So when they're vague, they're intentionally being vague so that you can say, oh, there's a lot lumped in with athletics, right? And so you can spend it on that. So it's one of the reasons why they use kind of some of that vague language is because you can only direct your funding towards that. So if you get really specific on it,
No,
then it limits how you can.
I understand that for
Yeah.
this,
but to be able to sell it in 20
for
days.
this, but if we're gonna sell it, we better get detailed.
Yeah, so here's what it's,
For example, athletics.
But I think, a lot of the comments out here is our taxpayers, that's me included,
Mhm.
are paying a lot of money in taxes.
and you want to know where it's
And I
going.
want- And I want to know where it's going.
Right, that's a fair,
And I think most of our constituents would want to know where it's going as well.
We can sure emphasize some things. I think it came up a few meetings ago about athletics. That's one of the first things that get hurt. We don't charge our kids in the schools, do we?
We don't
Okay.
pay to play.
The Tri-Cities, the kids pay to play sports. And I didn't think anybody paid here, but like when my kids were in school, there were kids that would not have got to play had they had to pay. Paul Sampson down at Golden Rule, any kid in town could drop in and say, my family can't afford basketball shoes. Well, you guys know you were raised here.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that's, Prosser loves their sports, and I know that some of this will go for sports, athletics,
Jason, I wonder I wonder, Craig, if you were to scan and send out to all of us those fact sheets that we used last time, it's a real visual and I'm a visual learner,
Mhm.
but that is what, that's the type of information our community sees. And I think that's what you're looking for. It's double-sided and it's like, it says, this is what a levy is, this is what it pays for. And it's visual and it just says, this is what it covers. This is what it doesn't cover, but this is what it covers. And I think that might answer some of your questions. If he could send that out to you tomorrow, I think that would be very helpful for you.
I think so. And I guess an additional comment would be, when does the budget process start for next year?
The spring, April,
And how,
March.
and I've looked at these, looked through most of the budget that was sent. This might be kind of a dumb question, but we have how many schools? Five?
Five schools.
We have 5 schools. Is there a reason why we don't budget each school individually? Versus one lump sum that we see? in here?
It's found in there. Well, it's not found
It's not found in there.
in that.
Just a question.
That's the year-end report that I will present does actually say how much was spent by school.
But we don't budget based
I
on,
mean, I budget it that way, but as far as those documents, it's just not line by line by line by line. It's again, that's the state's program software that we use. I mean, I have reports that I could print. It's by building, there's a location, code. So I mean, I could print whatever, kind of information
Whatever I
you
want,
want.
right?
If you want to know how much is spent by building, I could do that. Yeah.
Also have maintenance,
By
transportation, it's all of it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when we were looking at running the bond, we had talked very briefly, and God forbid I mention this again about closing Whitstrand. Well, we had gone through, it's okay, well, the maintenance costs are this much, the such and such is this much, and so you can do it that way. But I know we can, so I'm
The other
saying,
thing that's tricky is that all these programs too, that have some staff are, allocated to different, like special education. So I don't know, if you want every dollar that's coded to that building or just the basic ed piece, there's different ways of.
I haven't got to the bottom of that yet.
Which is fine. Papers, cheap.
I'm still working on the last set of paper I got.
So if we can get that out for you tomorrow, that might help answer some of those questions. So back to we're kind of all comfortable with 3 years. We're kind of comfortable with being as conservative as we can, so 3%. And the lowest would be the $2.13. Sounds like, Lisa, does that sound?
Can it
okay?
go lower?
Pardon me?
Can it go lower?
We're at $1.92 now.
I mean, a budget levy is what I think what we could sell. What's absolutely necessary to keep things going.
We're at $1.92 now.
Right, we're at $1.92 now with, 1 point something million deficit though too.
Right.
So, I mean, I think there's a balancing act between
because that doesn't
you know, the
include
levy and then
increased
if the
cost.
levy isn't covering that, you know, a fund balance is either gonna have to take a reduction of staff or something. I mean, those are kind of the options. It's a mathematical formula.
Well, that may lead me into another question if you're done.
The 21 cents.
Go ahead.
The 21 cents is paying is gonna cover some of that deficit.
I mean, you can see, I mean, the 3.6 million that's in our budget right now, right? So for the 21-22, it's, follow my math here, it's approximately half of the 3.1 million, right? And then half of the 3.6 million. That's what's in our 21-22 budget. And then, you know, so it's 3.2 million. Whatever the number is, that's what's included in our budget right now. But yeah, I mean, you could run it for a lower amount. I'm not sure how much lower you'd want to go other than now, just for full disclosure, we can say we want to collect X amount of dollars. And then the levy rate will be what it is. I mean, we could say we want to collect $3.7 million each year for 3 years. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it doesn't have to go up every year. It could stay the same, but obviously your rate would go down each year based upon your valuation. So there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat. I'm not sure, Matt, if we're prepared right now to say, well, if the levy was, you know, 3.5 million, you know, would we be able to sustain our current staffing with that? Probably not.
One of the other pieces on that is that there's still bargained agreements out there. So for instance, our coaches have formed a new labor unit. And so we can't even anticipate how their salary is going to increase. So that's tough to project 3 or 4 years out as well. Like what will we agree to with that labor unit? So that's part of it too. It's part of the trickiness, I think, in budgeting, trying to project out, well, how much are these programs going to cost in the future? Especially if we're hoping to grow them in some way. So kind of what that looks like, I think in football, we've committed to like, say, a certain number of football coaches to say, oh, we have to reduce in force, basically. We don't have the money to pay for all the coaches. And so let's start cutting down to freshman level or something like this. You get this many coaches per kid and try and figure out the ratio. So it gets to be tough there as well.
So a question to kind of further Lisa's a little bit. This levy amount at 2.3, is it going to cover the shortfall that we already have this year?
So the 2.13, and that money has already been that's included in the budget.
Okay. So we're already at $1 million plus shortfall.
Right.
We're going to
And
ask.
that's at with the 3.6. You know, half of that plus the 3.1. So you know, I could show you on that form, the property taxes were estimated to collect probably like 3.3 or something. So yeah, that's the issue is based upon we'll make the levy work, wherever that number is, we'll continue to budget that. But obviously we can't keep spending
$1 million over.
$1 million over every
Yeah.
year, 3-4 years, we're done, right? So,
So I guess that's my question, is this, what levy amount is going to get us back in line to a budget? I think that my mistake.
No, I mean,
right.
and I think
I think there's a combination though of of reduction and levy and all those things kind of come to play.
so. My concern is we've been talking here, but nobody has been able to say, this is how much money we need to run the school, whether it's a smaller number or a bigger number. And I think we need to be cautious of using language like, well, we're gonna cut this and cut that, because that comes off as, I think, to the public, that could be like, well, that they're blowing smoke, or, who cares? It's my taxes. And so I think, when we're talking about it in this room, we need to be careful and start, planting that in our mind, how we're going to talk to our neighbors and say, we really need this so we can continue to do. We really need this so our class sizes will stay small. And I think that it needs to start with us, as opposed to we're cutting everything, good
Right.
luck. And I think that's important, but we need to be able to say, this is how much money we need to run the school and keep it. We need to be able, as a board, to go out to the community and say that and explain why.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
I know, I'm not prepared to give an answer. 'Cause, I mean, I wouldn't want to put $1 million more on the taxpayers. Right, I mean, to cover that deficit. So I think it's a combination. Because, I mean, even at the 213, for 2023, the levy would go up from, 3.668 to 3,782,000. It's 100 and what, 26,000 or something like that. It's not. I mean, teachers get raises, the state,
Things will go down.
things
They keep going up and
keep
down.
going up.
But at some point, I mean, it has to be a balance between receiving more money in, but also we have to start looking at where to cut. Where do we have to start cutting? I'm gonna move. My mic is usually on this side, so. Is that better? Is that why it says president all the time on the board there?
And
Okay.
in in past years, a couple of years ago, well, pre-COVID, we did with the board, I did a whole compression planning session on budget cuts.
Right.
We've done that before.
Right.
I think what Craig's saying is right. It's really a combination, because there things that we really need to keep. Yes, absolutely. Are there things that maybe we can make some adjustments to? Absolutely. Are there things that, we maybe would have to make choices of? Absolutely. I do know, having lived through this once, it was a long time ago, and, things change, but the cost of doing business is not going down.
No.
So even if we stayed status quo, it's going to be more expensive. Even if we didn't add staff, even if we didn't, it's still going to cost more money, because it's not getting better. So what Craig's saying is a combination. So I think it's making, for me, it's making that commitment that we choose a level that we think is reasonable to ask our community. And then we also do have to balance that with reductions in some areas. It's just necessary. And this year we didn't make really staffing reductions. We've made a lot in the last 4 or 5 years, mostly through attrition, reduction in student counts. We used to have about 80, we've probably reduced about 10 to 15 paras in the last 5 years. We have reduced teachers, but we didn't this year. So what Craig's saying is yes, but it is also like this inflation is because everything's inflating. And so finding that happy medium takes time, but there's definitely some things we could do to look at priorities, to really evaluate through that budgeting process before April comes. And there's ways to gain community input and all kinds of things to do that, but it doesn't necessarily help us make the decision here. But I think it is hard to purely quantify, because if we said, gosh, we need 1.2 million, then we need 250, that 250 rate gives you 1.2, that $1.2 million increase. That's a simplified answer. and probably not the answer, but there's definitely things we can do to get us to that place where, you know, we didn't really operate in the negative until the whole levy cut came. There maybe was some years where there was some, but that's kind of when it started. And it was, you know, when you went from 4 million to 2 million, it was hard to all in a year or less than a year kind of adjust that $2 million. And we have never quite caught up to that loss of that 2 million. So just a little history.
Yeah, that, can you hear me now? Okay, good. You know, that's true. And when you look back at the school tax history in 2018, before McCleary and after the bond went into effect, our taxpayers were paying a combined $6 per thousand between the school bond and the M&O. And then we took the dive to $4.22. We still are, our current rate for this year is $4.50, the combined. And next year it goes up to $4.68. I wish I'd brought my papers from home, but I had showed that if we continue to do 3% increase every year for the next 5 years, we still would not be at the rate that we would have been at. We still would not have be back at the rate that we were at when we took the dump in 2018, when McCleary hit us. We still would not be at that McCleary rate. And so that is when everything kind of just, you know, it was, McCleary decision is going to be so great. Well, it wasn't great. It really had a huge negative impact on school districts, and especially on districts like our district that really depended on the collection from our local taxpayers for local programs. And we're never going to be able to catch up. So that being said, I think that you're right, Craig. We do have to blend between what we can collect without our taxpayers feeling like they're being nickel and dime to death. And I think they're, for the most part, they're very understanding. Our taxpayers do want to support programs. They do understand that, especially in 2018, that was like a shock time. But they do want to continue to support programs. I think they will continue to support us on this levy, and we just have to keep moving ahead in the right direction. And we are going to have to look at how we can manage our money, and we are going to have to look at what programs can be cut, how we can make best use of our dollar. And if we have to cut some programs, we cut some programs. But I believe that our community is going to continue to support our kids and are going to continue to support our programs. And so we just keep moving ahead. And if we go 3%, or if we go at the 213, or if Craig, if your recommendation is to go, you know, the 3% and at 225, whatever you recommend, I think we just need to be as conservative as we can with the dollars.
I have a question on one of the first things you said, Peggy. Is the bond rate going to go up higher than 255 next year? You said it would, when you first started speaking just now, you said the bond rate's going to go up to 260, $2.60.
Not bond, it's the levy rate. It can go up to 250.
Okay, so the bond is will it stay at 255 or lower
The
going
bond,
forward?
The levy can go up to.
No, I'm not asking about the levy.
Right,
bond will
maybe on-
actually go
on
down.
page 10, so the bond is
The bond is
255 per thousand and the levy 213.
right.
The bond will actually go
So
down
the-
year to year,
Well,
correct?
the bond's gonna be pretty stable.
Yeah.
Pretty
But I was
flat.
looking at the
Yeah.
total cost that our taxpayers are paying.
bond's pretty stable. And
I think what she was saying
stock,
was if we run the levy for 250, the total is still less than what we had in 2017.
Yeah.
But just something to think about, only because I was here before McCleary. We were at $3.04 pre-McCleary, and there were a lot of districts that were $4, $5, even $6 per thousand then. So we were nowhere near the top either. We were pretty middle of the road. So
And
just something to
everybody-
think about.
And I think the reason we see a little decrease in the bond is because of valuation.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, we had to,
Oh, I figured it was interest.
no, we had to do, an estimation. I'm gonna find out how long the bond, I think it's 25 years maybe, but
I know it
I'll,
was less than they recommended.
I'll get that answer for us, but,
Because it only raised the yearly, like 7 cents per thousand or something, and it cut like 5 years off.
but I think, our valuation was estimated fairly conservatively. So the rate should trickle down like it has, a few pennies, 4 cents or something, because our valuation's higher than what we estimated at that time when we passed the bond. But if you really want to look at, the total of both of them, right? 422 and 19, 438, 450, 468. I mean, again, I guess I could try and maybe do an estimate of what the bond would be in the next 4 years too. But
I just, the combined payment is, I know everybody was like sticker shock when we got our taxes in 2018, and it was like, "Ooh, okay." Yeah. But then they dropped significantly when the prior decision was made.
But with, new construction coming, I mean, the rate.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a betting person, there's no way that the rate's gonna be at 3% growth. I mean, it's gonna be more than that, but.
And something else I would like to add, and this is just mostly for Jason, is in the past, Bruce Matzimer and myself sat here and said the same thing, just beat the hell out of the desk. Years go up, years go down. We could have 25 kids rolling next year, and you go from 1 year where you're $1.5 million to the next year you're 1.2 plus. So we used to shoot for like what, 8%.
Yeah,
I think that was what Bruce and I threw a fit about, was right around 8%. Below that, we
I
got to
mean,
start.
8% is 1 month of
Yeah,
expenses,
it was 8 to 10% was what we wanted our,
no lower than 5.
yeah,
What we've
yeah, I
said.
know we threw a fit about that, but yeah, I think it was 8 is what we,
But you'll see on that,
Really hard
I mean,
thing.
sorry I wasn't here on Wednesday night, but that graph of the enrollment, I mean, you can see, I mean, it's pretty substantially dropping for, 8, 10 years. So,
2009 was our high water mark.
Okay, let's get back. to
okay,
this. All right. So,
I would be comfortable with the 213 or the 225.
either one.
Yes.
And
I would say the lower amount, 3 years, so the 213 for 3 years.
Jason, what would you say?
213, 3. Sorry,
can't we just keep these things on the whole time?
I know 213 for 3.
Okay, Elisa,
I would like to see it even go to like $2 at 3 years.
you were 250.
No, I said I would be comfortable with 213 or
Okay.
or up to 225. So
Well, then I'm going to put my vote in for 215.
We're not voting today. We're
Oh,
just
okay.
discussing.
Sorry.
We're trying to get agreement, I guess.
Okay. And I am comfortable with that 213 for 3 years. And I would be, I have faith in our community. I would like to go, I would like to go out in February. Andy, what would your preference be?
You know, I really have no preference on that. I think there's a little bit of a gamble with February, but if we hit it hard after February and run it right back in April, it's not the end of the world. But we've had pretty solid success, passing them over the years, so.
Okay, and being new, I wasn't aware that that the February date is important to base contracts on. We don't want to lose staff because a levy didn't pass in February or April. I think if we get people that were like on a committee that will get out there and really work in the community to promote it, and I know some, that maybe we should go in February to assure that hopefully it will pass and it will be more helpful for contracts. We don't want to lose good staff that we have,
Lisa?
I think February is not enough time. That's 20 days between the first of the year and the ballots going out. And I just don't think with the best of intentions, that's enough time to promote it adequately.
Okay, what date would you think?
I think August, I'd do April 2nd.
August or April? And Jason?
Don't really have a preference, but I would like to see if there's a way to estimate other districts doing the same thing. I think a lot of my decision would be based on what it would cost the district to run the levy.
okay, to share in the cost,
Correct.
right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll
we'd
have that
already
information
asked
for-
Craig to check who would be running. Yeah.
Maybe it's not the district, maybe it's like the city. It has to be balanced to go. No. So maybe, I don't remember if it was other districts per se,
Yeah.
or if it's other entities within the,
It's in the county, isn't it?
Well, it's or whatever, whoever is voting on that day. I'm not sure if there's other measures besides school districts in February, so to
Okay.
speak.
I just remember that as long as there was other things going on and we weren't by ourselves, that the cost went way down. So,
And again, it also depends on how many are running, right?
yeah, I think so.
So, I mean, I can
Okay.
find out what the total cost was, in 2018, when the levy was last run, what our portion was.
All the districts, almost all the districts in the state go off the same data too. So if districts are gonna run, they're probably running in February, but you can find out for sure. Because they get the same data from DAD.
And they have the same advice.
I think Andy brought up a good point too. Do we know in the community if there are any other levies or bonds that are gonna go out this year?
Yeah, if you have a
We
good
could-
fire district bond or something, that could be.
Could.
Like criminal justice tax?
Yeah.
If there's gonna be a new criminal justice tax by the county?
Could you guys refresh me again on what date we have to know for teachers' contracts and such?
We'd have to know, they would be notified May 15th.
May 15th,
So you'd actually have to have all the decisions done in May before that.
before that.
Yeah.
So a couple of things to help us make a decision for the next meeting would be getting the flyer, a copy of that flyer or the fact sheet out as soon as possible, maybe tomorrow if we can. And then get information on the cost for us to run the levy. If we go alone or if we go February, if we go in April, what the cost would be. And what other questions do we have? Well, three, it looks like we all in agreement about 3 year. Right. Any other questions I'm not thinking of? that you should ask?
Well, So it all, I mean, like I say, the time crunch, if it's in February, is OSPI's approval in a week.
Right,
So
but it's,
they want to know how much our levy is and what we're
Right.
spending it on.
which, I mean,
So-
it sounds like it's pretty, I mean, what, can this change? Do we have any verbiage that we need to,
I mean, I think OSPI have got some examples of
yeah,
other
do we need
districts.
to be talking about that tonight? On how we would, or utilize me?
Well,
Is there,
Like I said, I feel comfortable with that language as far as what we're spending the levy on. OSPI wants to know a little more detail. It's not,
but it has to be under 200 words.
no, that
Oh,
language there is what's going to go in the
okay,
voters
okay.
pamphlet.
So that
Craig,
pamphlet, that fact sheet. would be-
OSPI says, tell me if it's basic ed, go down 01, how much you're going to spend in levy, district-wide support, food service, special ed. That's a kind of a broader category that OSPI is asking for. Let's say, for example, that he said, okay, 3%, 3.782032. I need to tell OSPI how we're spending that amount of money. just
So
in
are you
broad
going to have, you'll
categories.
have that for us then for Wednesday?
Well, I have to submit that and then get OSPI's approval before next Wednesday.
Right.
So
But how are we going to see that? You're going to bring that to us on Wednesday?
if you want to see it, you don't have to. I mean,
so dumb question, Craig.
I'd
If
like
we,
to see it.
so you see what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
mean, the resolution says that we have received OSBI's
Right.
approval of our levy expenditure plan. That's part of the
All right,
resolution.
all right.
So
so if you send the resolution to them and it says, we're gonna pay for our security, we're gonna pay for our lunchroom and this, is that cemented in stone? That's where it has to go, or we just have to submit something that's the plan?
that's our plan. That's kind of like the
How much
budget.
can you deviate from the plan?
Well,
I see heads going the wrong way.
because it's a budget, basically. I mean,
So do we need to pick 3 or 4 items then?
Yep.
Or do you want it vague? Or can we not have?
no,
it vague?
I think what I'm hearing is we want to be pretty specific. OSBI is not requiring that level of detail.
Okay,
They just want, so basic ed, which would include security and technology and all these other kind of things.
oh, so you don't have to name them individually?
No, I'm just going to give a
Oh,
lump sum
okay.
in these various
All right.
programs for OSBI.
That's what I was
Now,
curious.
for our purposes,
Yeah.
we want to probably have more detail.
Yeah.
Here's, how much we're spending out of the levy for security guards,
Okay,
for technology,
Okay.
for,
see, I thought that's what they required, and then we would be,
it's
Right.
just a broad category for that.
Okay,
okay.
all right. Then we're fine. What else do you need from us
But-
on this?
I mean, I guess I need to know, certain, everybody has their opinion, but do we have a February at 2/13? Is that what I'm hearing, 3 years?
We can start drafting on what we've heard tonight.
Let's get the fact sheets to everybody first.
Okay.
And then if they have it, I have the information that I have on everybody. I'll just read you what I have. For Jason, you really don't have a preference on the date. You'd like more information on how we're going to sell this to the public, the fact sheets. We're going to get it to everybody. But 3 years, 213, correct? Elisa, you'd like to be $2 maximum, 3 years, and you would rather go in August 1st or April. Jeannie, you're 3 years, 213, and you would like February 1st or then April, is that correct? Andy, your February or April, $213, $3.
I don't care which month, but it has to be hopefully done and passed prior to May.
Before May, right. And Peggy, I say February or April,
Check it,
213,
215.
3 years. So get your information, and Craig's gonna get the information to us on the fact sheets.
Mhm.
If any of that changes for you, send me a text. Jason, send me a text and say, well, maybe we better go out a little farther or whatever, just send me a text. Any of you send me a text and then, but he's gonna plan for Wednesday to have
Resolution.
have the resolution ready for February, since that's where the majority is. We can change it.
Right.
But February, can he do two? Can he have one in February and one in April?
Well,
Can
would-
Jim have two just in case we go with the April date?
Well, you wouldn't need to approve that until
Okay,
the dates are on there.
okay, so it doesn't have, I'm not approving a date then.
Yeah, I mean, if you did it April 26th, election date, the resolution is February 25th.
Okay, all right. So we'll do one for February. We'll do the February one for this
Right,
meeting.
and
But
if it doesn't,
213,
if it doesn't pass, then we go to April or another date.
okay, 213, 3 years. Okay, all right. And then we'll take, and we'll go from there.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So back to any other questions on that portion of the meeting?
Have we talked to anybody about forming a citizens committee? Is that like in the works, ready to go?
Uh,
We have kind of a short list of patrons. We brainstormed, but no, we haven't hit go on that yet.
You can have standing committees or,
Oh, can you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. you know,
You have just some ideas of it?
No, I was just, again, if it's going in February, we need like a committee going
ASAP.
on Thursday, after the meeting.
Okay, we have our next regular meeting is on December 8th at 7 o'clock here at Housel. We are moving into executive session under RCW 42.30.110 1I, and it's to discuss with our legal counsel representing the agency matters relating to agency enforcement actions, or to discuss with agency counsel representing the agency litigation or potential litigation. Do I have to read this all? To which the agency, the governing body, or a member acting in an official capacity is or is likely to become a party with public knowledge regarding the discussion is likely to result in an adverse legal or financial consequences to the agency. So I'm going to adjourn the regular meeting. Yeah, now, and it is, looks like it's 7:42. Thank you very much. And we will move into executive session at 7:45, and it will be for 30 minutes. So until 8:15. And at that time, we will move back into our regular board meeting. And we will adjourn from that. There will be no action taken during the executive session.